Hi, my name's Maris. I was the quiet one, always the one who smiled, said thank you, stepped aside. But last year, my father dunked my head in a toilet. My sisters stood by and laughed. They said it was a joke, that I was too sensitive. But they also burned my mother's will, cut me out, called me greedy. And now they clap for each other like they're heroes. But the thing is, what happens when the quiet ones stop staying quiet? Who do they become? I was 9 years old the first time my father decided to teach me a lesson in the upstairs bathroom of our home on Meeting Street. It was a humid Charleston summer. Thick air clung to the window panes, and the cicadas outside screamed like nature's own warning siren. Inside, the house was quiet, except for the distant ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs and the occasional groan of the pipes. The hallway smelled of sun-baked carpet and the lingering sting of bleach. But that bathroom, smelled like cold porcelain and fear. I don't remember what I'd said that made him mad. Something small, probably, a question with the wrong tone, a correction too confident for a girl my age. What I do remember is the sound of the bathroom door clicking shut behind him, the way he turned the lock with precision, his face expressionless. He didn't raise his voice. That would have made it too obvious. No, his voice was cool, controlled. The kind of tone you couldn't argue with because it already assumed victory. "You don't talk back to me, Maris," he said. And then he moved. Quick, mechanical. He grabbed my shoulders and shoved me toward the toilet. My hands shot out, bracing against the rim. Cold. Slick. My knees bent. My breath hitched. The water churned just inches from my face. And then, he pushed. It wasn't a full dunk, not that time. Just enough for my nose to touch the water, for the smell of ammonia and metal and waste to fill every corner of my lungs, just enough for the humiliation to settle, thick and permanent. I gasped, the sound muffled by the bowl. The water gurgled beneath me, and then I heard her, my sister Seraphine. She was in the hallway just outside the door, pretending to talk on the phone. "No, she's such a brat," she said loudly. And then she laughed, a light, rehearsed kind of laugh. Not at me, exactly, but at the performance, at the theater of our father's discipline. Her voice didn't shake. Mine couldn't even find a way out of my throat. In that instant, something in me folded. Not broke, just bent, compacted, made smaller. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stayed still, because stillness was survival. Silence was armor. When he finally let me go, I staggered back, dripping and burning. He adjusted his shirt cuffs as if he'd just fixed a crooked painting or tightened a screw. "Respect," he muttered, then turned and walked out. The door remained open behind him. I stood there alone, staring at myself in the mirror. Spotted glass, bad lighting, a reflection of someone already learning to disappear. The tiles beneath my bare feet felt colder than they should. I wiped my face on my sleeve and took inventory. Skin intact, but something deeper bruised. Not visible, not fixable. That moment never left me. For years it lived just under the surface, buried like a splinter beneath the skin, dormant, quiet, until the smell of disinfectant decades later brought it screaming back like a siren in the night. It was the evening of my father's 70th birthday. I hadn't been back to that house in nearly 15 years. After the renovations, it had become something of a social landmark, a mansion for hire, perfect for weddings, fundraisers, and apparently, performative family reunions. The walls had been stripped and repainted. The floors gleamed with polished oak. Chandeliers had replaced ceiling fans. But beneath the layers of gloss and gilding, it was still the same house, the same bones, the same ghosts. My invitation had arrived just 3 days before the event. A thick cardstock envelope, my name spelled Maurice in cursive foil. An afterthought, but I came anyway. The door opened to warmth and noise. Seraphine was there to greet me, her arms outstretched like we were close. Her smile was perfect, practiced, sorority president turned polished wife. "You made it," she said, but her tone made it clear. I was an inconvenience, a loose thread. Her husband, Philip, offered a polite nod and directed me toward a side table near the restroom. "We figured you'd prefer something a little quieter," Seraphine added, eyes already scanning the room for someone more important. The table was tucked into a corner, half hidden behind a support column. A floral centerpiece blocked half my view of the room, but what I could see was enough. My father, seated at the head table beneath a massive oil painting of our grandfather, glass of red wine in hand, grinning like a senator. He was already holding court, laughing, bragging, telling old stories to people who wanted to be near power, no matter how stale. "I was tough but fair," he said, raising his glass. The crowd chuckled. Some nodded, some clapped. Seraphine, radiant in pearls and pride, leaned over to whisper to a guest. They both glanced my way. I knew that look. It hadn't changed in decades. It was the look she gave when she thought I was too stupid to understand the joke, when she thought I couldn't hear her behind the door. I took a sip of wine. It tasted metallic, hollow. My plate arrived, steak, overcooked, and vegetables drowned in butter. No one asked how I liked it. No one checked if I had dietary needs. I was scenery. The bathroom door beside me opened again. The same scent drifted out. Chemical, sharp, impossible to ignore. My throat tightened. I gripped my napkin, eyes fixed on the silverware, counting the tines of my fork to stay grounded. A guest across the room raised a glass. "To family values," my father beamed. "And loyalty," he added. Another round of claps. I felt something stir deep inside, not rage, not grief, something steadier, sharper, resolve. They didn't see me now, just like they didn't see me then. But this time, I wasn't a child pressed against porcelain. I was a woman with a memory like steel and a spine built from silence. They thought I'd fade again after dessert, that I'd leave quietly, tail tucked, head bowed. They were wrong. I looked up, smiled. The room kept buzzing, but I was somewhere else entirely. I was watching, cataloging, remembering every detail. And beneath the string quartet and wine glasses and fake laughter, I whispered 2 words under my breath. Never again. The bathroom door creaked one last time. The scent hit me, but it didn't break me. It sharpened me. They may have erased me from their walls, but I've started to write myself back, just not in ink. I didn't say a single word during dinner. The table overflowed with noise, forks scraping china, glasses clinking, overlapping conversations punctuated by bursts of laughter, but none of it reached me. I kept my eyes low, pushing roasted carrots across my plate, tasting none of it. Even the silence I carried was too loud for them. No one noticed when I slipped away, not even Saber, who once could read my moods like breathing. I moved toward the back hallway, where the wallpaper still peeled near the baseboards. My pulse pounded in my ears. The house, though elegant and grand, felt suddenly too small. I needed air. Outside, the night greeted me like a velvet curtain, cool, still, and thick with humidity. I leaned against the screened patio door and listened. Laughter spilled out from the dining room windows. Someone mentioned a joke I didn't understand, and everyone roared. I tasted the tang of disinfectant in the air, a ghost of bleach still clinging to the bathroom tile from earlier. That memory, the harsh scent, the cold porcelain, the flash of humiliation, snapped through me again, then faded like fog. I stayed there, head pressed to the mesh, watching moths flutter toward the porch light. I wondered if any part of this house still remembered me, or if I'd already begun to vanish from its bones. The next morning took its time rising. Gray light crept in beneath the plantation shutters, stretching long and cold across the hardwood floors. In this house, silence always came first, before coffee, before movement, before memory. It was a silence packed with ghosts, and I was just another one floating through it. I stepped into the hallway, barefoot. The boards were colder than I remembered. From somewhere down the hall came the soft thud of the maid opening shutters. I recognized her footsteps, deliberate, quiet, careful not to wake the house's fragile peace. It reminded me of how I used to walk here as a child, always afraid of making noise in rooms that didn't feel like mine. Each corridor felt longer now, stretched with time and intention. The walls, once cluttered with family photos, had been redesigned, or so Seraphine had claimed. Reframed, repainted, reimagined. But what she really meant was erased. I passed a console table that used to hold a photo of me at 10, missing teeth and all. In its place now stood a vase of artificial peonies and a small brass statue of a heron. I paused outside my mother's sewing room. I hadn't stepped in here in years. Something in me hesitated at the door, hand on the knob, as if crossing the threshold might let in everything I'd spent so long trying to forget. The scent hit me first: mothballs, lavender sachets, and old linen. Nothing had changed. The old Singer sewing machine sat quiet in the corner like a sleeping relic, its paint chipped and threads still looped through the needle from her last unfinished project. Dust hung in the air, soft and gold in the morning light. I touched the machine gently, my fingers ghosting over its familiar curves. The bobbins still sat in their little wooden tray, sorted by color. Her silver scissors, the ones she never let me touch, lay beside a yellowed fabric guidebook. I opened one of the drawers. Patterns, traced by her hand, bits of lace, a half-stitched collar. Then, folded beneath an old tape measure, a letter addressed to me. My name, in her hand. But I didn't open it. Not yet. Not in this house. This room was my anchor, the only one left. When I passed back through the living room, I heard a voice drift in from the front porch. I paused near the archway, hidden behind the molding. It was Seraphine. Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind she reserved for guests, acquaintances, and manipulators. "Yes, it's all handled now," she said into the phone. "Safe deposit box, everything's in order. We just had to be firm, that's all." There was a pause, then a small laugh. A click. I watched her drop a small bronze key into her purse. It glinted in the sunlight, unmistakable. I froze. That key. The safe deposit box had been a mystery for years. They'd told me it was lost, misfiled, disappeared during the move. When I'd asked about it after the funeral, Seraphine looked me dead in the eye and said, "There was never anything of value in it, Maris." But now I knew. That was the lie. It had been with her all along. I turned away before she saw me. My stomach twisted, rage blooming quietly in my chest like fire under ice. I walked back through the hall, hands trembling. I needed to sit. The weight of betrayal pressed down like stone. On the wall beside the staircase was a new portrait, framed in gold leaf. Seraphine's wedding, her in a satin gown, saber beside her. My mother, reserved and composed in the background, but not me. The space where my graduation portrait once hung was gone. So was the one of me in 3rd grade, holding the blue ribbon from the state spelling bee. I scanned the room. I was nowhere. I had been wiped clean. They didn't just push me out. They erased me. From the walls, the stories, the archives of this family. I took out my phone with hands still shaking. Snap. The wedding photo. Snap. Her purse, the glinting key bulging behind the zipper. Proof. Quiet pieces. Early evidence. A story slowly being told. I sat on the stairs, legs tucked close. Through the stained glass window above the landing, light spilled onto the walls, shifting shapes of green, amber, and soft blue. They danced across the floor like whispers. A small comfort, and still more honest than anything they offered me inside these walls. If I didn't exist to them anymore, then I had nothing left to prove. No mold to fit, no name to protect. I could become anything. I could become everything they never saw coming. I whispered it aloud, a vow only the shadows could hear. If they've erased me, then I get to start over, on my terms. And in that house, still and silent, filled with curated lies, I made my first quiet move. Not revenge, not yet, but rebirth. Sleep was a stranger to me that night. I sat on the stairs long after the last light flickered out, long after the murmurs behind closed doors went silent. The stained glass window above the landing slowly surrendered its color to the dim gray of dawn, like the house itself was washing off the performance of morning. By the time the smell of coffee floated down the hallway, I had already showered, brushed out my hair, and clipped it back with a plain barrette. No earrings, no mascara, no lipstick. They wouldn't get the satisfaction of calling me done up or desperate. I wanted no illusions, just clarity. No wine haze, no emotion hangover. Just the sharp taste of truth. Seraphine's text came in at 1:43 a.m. No greeting, just a command. 10 a.m., patio. Brunch for close family friends, to honor father properly. I could practically hear her voice in the text. Curated concern wrapped in performative grace. She never missed a chance to put on a show. I didn't rush. I made my way to the patio deliberately, my flats making no sound on the hardwood floor. Not timid, not bold, just present. The back patio faced the marsh, where sunlight shimmered like foil on the water. A dozen white-clothed tables dotted the space, centerpieces of lemons and baby's breath gleaming in the mid-morning light. Champagne flutes sparkled in manicured hands that hadn't seen a sink or mop in decades. Conversations buzzed around me like gnats. I slipped into a seat at the farthest corner of the table, hoping for peace and knowing I wouldn't get it. No one greeted me. I was less than a guest. I was a blemish. Seraphine moved through the space like she owned it, her heels never catching on the rug, her dress cinched just enough to be tasteful. Her voice floated from group to group, sugar-dusted and practiced. "So lovely you could join us. He adored your generosity. A loss for the whole community, really." She made sure everyone knew she was grieving the right way. At the head of the table sat Saber, my father. His gaze was steady, almost too steady, like he'd rehearsed being forgetful long enough to master the performance. He didn't meet my eyes when I sat down. The king on his crumbling throne, the clink of forks and the soft fizz of mimosas filled the silence between false condolences. I watched Seraphine refill her glass and stand. A hush fell over the patio, a cue well followed. "To those," she began, raising her glass, "who carry the family name with dignity." She let the pause linger like the lift before a slap. "And not to disgraces who drag it through courtrooms and gossip columns." Laughter, nervous and sharp, sliced through the moment. I felt every eye pivot toward me. Some blinked and looked away. Others held their breath like they weren't sure if they should laugh, too. My cheeks burned, but I didn't flinch. I locked eyes with Seraphine. She smiled with the same mouth she used to whisper venom, tilting her head like she'd made a joke among friends. "Drink up," she said softly, "just for me." I lowered my glass without taking a sip. "Enjoy your brunch," I said to the table, my voice steady. It didn't matter if no one heard. Then came the moment that cemented everything. A man, mid-50s, expensive watch, shoes polished to reflect the sky, leaned in and extended his empty flute toward me. "Excuse me," he said, casual as a cough. "Could I get another mimosa?" He thought I was staff. For a second, I didn't move. Not out of offense, just awe. The audacity of it, the ease. He didn't see me. He didn't look. I smiled faintly, took the glass from him, and walked toward the house. No one corrected him. No one called me back. Inside, the air was cooler, cleaner. I ducked into the nearest bathroom and locked the door. The woman in the mirror wasn't the girl I'd once been. 36. Strong jaw. A quiet rage behind the eyes. The girl from the toilet memory was still there, but smaller now, watching instead of steering. "They think I'm invisible," I whispered. "That's their mistake." I turned on the faucet and splashed water across my face, cold, bracing. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Inside the notes folder were months of careful documentation. Dates, quotes, voice memos, photos. A picture of Seraphine's spare key hidden in a planter. A blurry image of a portrait Saber had moved after the reading of the will. A screenshot of a bank transfer he forgot I could still access. And the most important file, a voice recording from 6 weeks ago. Saber and Seraphine in the study, discussing me, discussing what needs to be done before she digs too far. I stared at an old photo of my mother stored in the same folder, her eyes filled with clarity, not softness. That look said, "You already know what's true. Now act like it." I tucked the phone back into my bag, straightened my spine, and walked out. Back on the patio, Seraphine was in the middle of some tale about father's community awards. Saber glanced at me, then away. I reclaimed my seat. This time I didn't ask. The man who mistook me for staff looked up, startled. "Oh, sorry, I thought—" I looked directly at him and offered a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "It's not a problem," I said, my voice silk over steel. He nodded quickly and turned away. Seraphine's smile faltered for half a second. Just a flicker, a tremor in her mask. As the brunch faded and the guests began to peel away, some toward the valet, others toward gossip in smaller circles, I remained seated. Let them think they'd shamed me into silence. Let them think they'd won. They didn't know that shame was no longer a tool they could use. I'd outgrown it. I'd turned it into ammunition. They wanted to write me out of the story. But I had a pen of my own now, and all the receipts to go with it. I wasn't the disgrace. I was the reckoning. After brunch ended and the clink of cutlery faded from the patio, the house felt suddenly too large, too quiet. The laughter that had filled the air just minutes before now hung like the echo of a dream. Guests trickled toward their cars, balancing leftovers and waving politely. Seraphine stood glowing at the threshold, the consummate hostess, one hand delicately pressed to her pearls, the other fluttering in practiced goodbyes. I didn't join them. I couldn't. My throat was dry, heart a slow drum in my chest. I slipped away through the side hallway, passing by the curated collection of family portraits on the wall, smiling faces, sun-drenched vacations, perfect frames, and still, the same gap where my photo should have been, a space erased, as if I had never truly belonged. The weight of my bag pulled at my shoulder, as if it carried more than just essentials. My phone buzzed faintly inside, a cold reminder of all the messages I hadn't answered, all the years I'd buried under silence. I muttered to no one. "I'm going for some air, not needing permission, just escape." I walked barefoot through the kitchen, each tile chilling the soles of my feet. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The root was burned into me from childhood. The mudroom opened into the garage, dim, sun-warmed, and lined with shadows. Light from high windows filtered in as faint beams, catching dust in mid-air like golden snow. The scent of the space wrapped around me, motor oil, cardboard, and a ghost of lavender. My mother. Her scent lingered like a secret whispered to only me. This was her domain once. A quiet world of storage and old tools, of holiday bins and forgotten crafts. Her gardening gloves still hung on their hook, perfectly arranged, fingertips pointing down. I reached for one. The worn leather was stiff, but familiar. 1,000 memories stirred in the touch. Her hands, always working, always capable, always gentle. I knelt before a tall stack of bins and tugged the top one open. Inside, folds of quilts, delicate lace, and yellowing fabric. I buried my hands into the pile and lifted an old Afghan. The scent hit me like a wave, her perfume, faint but present. I pressed the corner to my face and held it there. Digging deeper, I uncovered a cracked plastic box filled with odds and ends, books, mismatched photo frames, a dried corsage wrapped in tissue. I pulled it into the center of the floor and sat cross-legged, letting the chill of the concrete steady me. Each item was a piece of her. Needlepoint guides, magazines from the 1990s with curling edges, a church hymnal with a cracked spine. My fingers traced faded words, lingering over her annotations in the margins. Her handwriting was neat, tight, unmistakably hers. Then, as I lifted a needlepoint book, something fluttered free. I caught it mid-air. An envelope, yellowed at the edges and sealed with brittle glue. My name was scrawled across the front in her delicate hand. My breath hitched. For a long moment I just stared at it, heart thudding. Then I slid a fingernail under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single folded document, handwritten, dated just 3 months before her death. The heading stopped me cold. Last Will and Testament of Elena, Thorne. I read the lines with a rising urgency, eyes scanning for confirmation. There it was, clearly stated. She had left everything to me. The savings, the house, her personal effects, all of it. Not to Seraphine, not to Saber. Me? Her quiet storm, she wrote in parentheses, underlined once. My hands trembled. I pressed the paper against my chest. A sob clawed at my throat, but I didn't let it rise. Not here, not now. They'd lied, for years, told me the will had been lost, that her passing came too suddenly to finalize anything. They said the lawyers had no file, that it had all been settled already, but it hadn't been. They knew. They hid this. I swallowed the rising heat in my chest and sat back against the boxes, the walls of the garage leaning in. I was no longer a guest in this house. I had been its rightful heir all along. Then, my phone buzzed in my bag. I jumped, nerves frayed. The screen lit up with a number I hadn't seen in over a decade. Leora. The text was simple. Maris, I've always meant to give you this. Attached below was a video file. My thumb hovered, then tapped. The video opened with the sunlit interior of a cozy kitchen. Leora's kitchen. My mother sat at the table, her face older than I remembered, but calm, present. She was wearing her favorite navy cardigan, the one with tiny stitched flowers. Her hair was tucked behind her ears. She looked directly at the camera. Her voice broke through the quiet garage. This is my will. To my youngest, my quiet storm, this is for you. Tears rolled down my cheeks silently. I couldn't breathe. I watched her, that soft tone, the calm authority in her voice as she detailed her decisions, explaining why, naming me again and again, affirming her choice. When the video ended, I replayed it, then again and again, not just to hear the words, but to feel them, to feel her. My mother. Eventually, I stood. I placed the document into a Ziploc bag I found on the shelf. I took photos of every page, uploading them to 3 different folders. One to the cloud, one to an encrypted drive, one sent to my private email with the subject, Project Witness. In the dusty window above the workbench, I caught my reflection, eyes red but clear, spine straight. I wasn't that girl in the shadows anymore. They buried the truth, I whispered, voice steel. I'll raise it like a flag. I gathered the will, the envelope, the book, slipped my shoes back on. My legs shook, but my steps were certain. Upstairs, my old room waited with its peeling wallpaper of moons and stars. I locked the door behind me and sat at the desk. My phone screen glowed. I paused the video on her smile, just before she looked down at the paper, her hand resting on it like a seal. I touched the screen gently. They burned the will, I whispered, but I have her voice. I looked around the room that once held my girlhood, that would now house the beginning of my reckoning. And now, I said softly, so will everyone else. By the time the first pale light broke through my old bedroom curtains, my eyes had already adjusted to the dark. I'd been awake for hours, lying on my back, staring at the ceiling. The document on the desk burned a hole in my mind. My mother's true final will, the one Saber and Seraphine swore didn't exist, and Leora's video. Her voice still echoed in my ears. Shaky, raw, real. I sat up slowly, the bedsheets cold against my skin. I hadn't unpacked much. I didn't need to. This trip wasn't about nostalgia. It was about truth, the kind people pretend not to see until it forces its way into their vision. I walked to the desk and picked up the folder. It felt heavier than it should, like holding a promise and a threat at once. I tucked the document into the bottom compartment of my leather bag, right beneath my phone, where Leora's testimony waited in silence. The truth didn't need to scream, it only had to exist. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that wrapped around your throat and dared you to break it. From the distant kitchen came the faint sounds of clinking dishes. The maid, probably Greta, setting out breakfast like she'd done every morning for 20 years. The scent of coffee drifted into the hallway. Dark roast, bitter, familiar. I stood in front of the hallway mirror and buttoned my navy blazer. No makeup today beyond a thin swipe of mascara. No earrings, no need for decoration. Today was not about spectacle, it was about presence. A silent kind of statement. I was here, and I was not afraid. A sharp car horn broke the stillness. I looked out the window. My cousin Darla waved from behind the wheel of a rented sedan. She'd flown in for the memorial, all the way from Austin, leaving behind her 2 kids and a husband who, in her words, still couldn't figure out how to fold laundry. I grabbed my bag, walked down the hall, and past the wall of family portraits. Still no picture of me. There were baby photos of Seraphine, school awards, Saber's honorary medals, even a faded Polaroid of their golden retriever wearing a Santa hat. But me? Nothing. It used to hurt. Now it only confirmed what I already knew. I'd always been the invisible truth they didn't want hanging on the wall. Darla leaned over and popped open the passenger door. Ready? As I'll ever be, I said, sliding in and clicking the seatbelt. The ride to the church was short, but thick with unsaid things. Charleston's narrow streets shimmered with leftover rain, the trees glistening with dew. The live oaks stood heavy with moss, drooping like old secrets. Darla tried to make small talk, some comment about the humidity and how her hair was rebelling, but my smile was paper thin. She let the silence grow. I appreciated that. The church was already busy when we arrived. Cars lined the curb, and people in dark clothes filed through the tall wooden doors. A large banner hung above the entrance, celebrating the life of Eleanor Saber. My mother's face beamed from a photo collage by the doorway. Her in the garden, her holding Seraphine's babies, her at some community fundraiser. Not one photo of us together, not even when I graduated early, not even when she visited me in the hospital after the accident. I stepped inside. The scent of lilies wrapped around me instantly, mingling with beeswax polish and something older, like dust soaked into pews over decades. Rows of chairs lined the church hall, white ribbons tied to each one. A slideshow played at the front, image after image of a life carefully curated to look whole. I sat in the front row, my bag at my feet, feeling the weight of what I carried press into my leg. Saber entered next, arm in arm with Seraphine. He looked dapper in a navy suit, but his gait had slowed. People whispered about his memory issues, his increasing confusion. I knew a performance when I saw one. The old man might be slowing, but he hadn't forgotten how to manipulate a room. He sat beside me, his aftershave a mix of tobacco and age. "Did Mom ever give you the original will?" I asked in a low voice. He blinked, turning to the altar. "The original?" he echoed, then added with a faint chuckle, "I don't recall. Was there a second version?" "There was," I said softly. "Signed 3 months before she died." He tapped his temple with a shaky finger. "At this age, everything slips. You know how it is, sweetheart." I looked at him. "I know exactly how it is." Before he could reply, Seraphine stood and called for attention. "We'll begin with a few words from the family," she said sweetly, then gestured toward me. "Maris has something she'd like to share about our mother." "Oh, does she now?" I stood. Every pair of eyes followed me as I walked toward the podium. I unfolded a short note from my blazer pocket. It was calm, kind, polished like stone. This wasn't the moment for confrontation. This was a seed. "My mother loved truth," I began, scanning the crowd. "She taught me that fairness was not a luxury, but a responsibility, that dignity—" A burst of static cut me off, then nothing. I looked down. The mic had gone dead. I turned toward the tech table. Seraphine stood there, hand hovering over a switch, her lips curved in a practiced smile. She mouthed, "Wrap it up." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A cough echoed from the back. I took a breath and stepped back. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I walked straight down the aisle, my heels sharp against the tile. When I reached Seraphine, I paused just long enough to whisper, "If you keep pushing, next time I speak, it'll be in front of a judge." For the first time all morning, her smile cracked. I returned to my seat beside Darla. My hands were still, but inside, my pulse drummed like war. The slideshow continued on screen, my mother baking, laughing, holding other people's children, her face serene, saintly, and yet I sat there, carrying the truth like a quiet flame. Let them dismiss me. Let them pretend I didn't exist. That slideshow didn't show the full story. But I would. Eventually, on my terms, in the right room, because this was just the warning. The memorial ended beneath a sky the color of worn slate, heavy with the scent of approaching rain. People scattered like leaves, lingering in small clusters, murmuring their condolences as if my mother had only just passed. Some faces I remembered from childhood birthdays, some from holiday dinners that now felt like relics from another life. They all seemed to look at me with a strange mix of pity and confusion, unsure whether to hug me or avoid me. I gave a few polite nods, shook some hands that didn't deserve it, and pulled away before Darla could press her offer of a ride again. I needed the drive, alone. With the windows down and the raw salt air crashing against my face like a cleansing tide. Charleston was washed in a dull gray as I drove. Rain hadn't quite come, but everything was damp. Pavement, storefronts, even the mossy oaks. My fingers gripped the steering wheel with a calm steadiness that surprised me. The warning I had whispered into Seraphine's ear back at the memorial echoed in my mind. I knew she'd heard me. I saw it in the way her eyes tightened, just for a second, behind that practiced smile, but she didn't know how much I had already set in motion. When I reached the small rental cottage by the marina, it welcomed me like a secret I was allowed to keep. Gulls screeched above, and the briny scent of low tide crawled in through the cracked windows. I kicked off my heels at the door and let the silence stretch around me. The mansion had been full of ghosts and whispered judgments. Here, there was only me, and that was enough. I dropped my bag on the desk and flipped on the lamp. The soft amber glow touched everything like an old friend. My laptop sat waiting. A folder labeled Inheritance War blinked on the desktop. I had created it weeks ago, during a storm of sleepless nights and shattered illusions. Back then, it had held only a few notes and questions. Now, it would become my arsenal. From my bag, I pulled the envelope. Inside, the original will, unaltered, unsilenced. Beside it was my phone, still showing Leora's message. I've always meant to give you this. I'm sorry it took so long. I plugged in my headphones and tapped play. My mother's voice spilled into my ears, soft but unwavering. To my youngest, my quiet storm. I closed my eyes, the sound anchoring me. Her tone wasn't fragile. It was intentional. Every word chosen like a stone in a sling. I opened a blank document and began typing the cover letter to the probate attorney, a woman named Alma Cruz, recommended by an old friend from law school. My fingers didn't tremble. They flew. This is not merely a dispute, I wrote. It is a deliberate concealment of assets and legacy theft. Attached are the preliminary documents. I scanned the will, encrypted it, and saved it to multiple backup locations. I attached Leora's video, time-stamped and watermarked. Added screenshots of Seraphine's purse and the old brass key tucked inside. Then a spreadsheet, dates, discrepancies, every moment since my mother's death where something hadn't added up. When I finally pressed send, the air around me shifted. The screen blinked, message sent, done. But I wasn't finished. Next, I opened a chat with a video editor I'd found through a friend of a friend. He specialized in restoring corrupted audio and video, had worked on old family reels and even archival footage. Our previous chats had been brief, cautious, but tonight, I sent him the damaged clip. "This is all I have left of her voice," I typed. "Can you clean it up?" His reply came minutes later. "Leave it with me. I'll bring her back." I leaned back in my chair and exhaled so deeply it felt like I was releasing years of grief. I poured a glass of water and moved to the window. The marina was alive with gentle motion, boats rocking, ropes creaking, soft knocks against the wooden docks. And my reflection stared back at me from the glass, not the broken girl they left crying in a bathroom, but someone sharper, weathered, patient. "Let them think I'm quiet," I whispered to no one. "Let them think I stayed down." I turned back to the desk and opened a new folder. Project Witness. In it, I began depositing everything: scans, screenshots, lists of people who had seen, heard, or even suspected, copies of text messages, voicemails, snippets of old conversations I'd recorded out of paranoia, and now, with hindsight, seemed prophetic. By midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a reply from Attorney Cruz. "This case has merit. If your documents are accurate, the court will not look kindly on the concealment. My advice, stay silent publicly. Build your case. Let them think they're safe." I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. "I've learned from the best. My mother." The night outside thickened. I reached for a small photo printer and printed the section of the will, her handwriting clear. To my youngest, my quiet storm. I slipped it into a small silver frame I'd brought from my old apartment. It looked right sitting on the desk beside my laptop, like a lighthouse above turbulent waters. I repeated the words aloud, once, twice. To my youngest, my quiet storm. It didn't hurt anymore. It was like armor. The marina had gone still, slack-tide, and I felt it inside me too. A quiet suspension, like holding your breath before the strike. Before bed, I backed up everything one more time. Uploaded to the cloud. Saved onto a USB tucked inside the lining of my bag. No more lost voices. No more buried truths. Just as I turned off the lamp, my phone buzzed again. "Initial pass looks good," the editor wrote. "You'll have her voice, clear as day, by the weekend." I pressed my palm to the surface of the desk, grounding myself in that moment. "Thank you," I whispered. The room dimmed as the marina lights flickered through the blinds. I crawled into bed and pulled the blanket tight, the frame still on the desk, watching over me like she used to when I was small. They always mistook my silence for submission, but it was never weakness. It was a warning. I was loading. It began at 6:12 a.m., a time when even the Charleston gulls hadn't started screaming at the sky yet. I stirred in bed, groggy, disoriented. Then came the vibrating hum of my phone. One buzz, then two, then a chorus. My heart sank. Something was wrong. When I blinked open my eyes and checked the screen, the notifications hit me like a wave. Dozens of missed calls. Group messages reawakened from the dead. Mentions, shares, private messages from names I hadn't heard in years. And right there, floating at the top of it all, was a Facebook post. "What My Sister Did to Our Family" by Seraphine Quinn. My thumb hovered. I sat up slowly in bed, as if delaying the pain might soften the blow. But the moment I tapped it open, it sliced through me like glass. Seraphine had spun a masterpiece of manipulation, paragraphs of self-pity, sugar-laced victimhood, and outright lies. She painted me as a vulture, a greedy daughter who waited for our mother's death to claim her share, someone who rewrote history to suit her narrative, and manipulated grief into entitlement. Her post dripped with faux sorrow, punctuated by cherry-picked, cropped screenshots of old messages, taken out of context and weaponized like daggers. What stung the most were the comments. I always knew something was off about Maris. She's been jealous of Seraphine for years. She probably pressured her mom to change the will. Seraphine had used the public's favorite weapons, passive aggression and selective memory. And now, her narrative was being shared, amplified, believed. My fingers trembled as I locked my phone and stared at the ceiling. Dawn light sliced through the blinds in pale stripes. My body remained still, but my mind sprinted. For a few moments, I sat there on the edge of the bed, unable to decide if I should cry, scream, or stay silent. Then I stood, slow and mechanical, and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor to my small living room. The marina outside shimmered in early morning blue, boats bobbing gently, like they had no idea someone's name was being dragged through digital mud just a few feet away. I opened my laptop and exhaled deeply. There would be no retaliation post, not yet, no screaming match through comment sections. I wasn't going to engage in a war of loud words. I needed precision, not noise. First, I created a new folder. Smear Campaign. Inside it, I saved every screenshot, every cruel comment, every share, every breadcrumb Seraphine had dropped. Then I renamed the folder's first file, The Truth, scheduled to drop. I scrolled to the video of my mother, the one she had recorded just weeks before her death. Soft voice, clear mind, and unmistakable clarity about her final wishes. Her face filled the screen, her smile sad but sure. She didn't just speak, she testified. Her words would be my anchor. I played it twice, then closed the laptop. I didn't need to hear her say it again. I knew what she'd left me, and why. Later that morning, I slipped on jeans and a hoodie, tied my hair back, and headed to the corner store. Normally, the cashier would give me a casual nod, sometimes ask about my weekend. Today, he didn't look up. He scanned my items in silence, his eyes fixed on the register. Behind me, a woman leaned into her friend and whispered, "That's her." Her friend's glance was quick, judging, then deliberately avoided my eyes. I paid and walked out without a word. Back in the safety of my car, I gripped the steering wheel with both hands. The ache wasn't just humiliation, it was displacement. Once again, I was the villain in someone else's convenient story. My reflection stared back at me in the rearview mirror. I didn't look broken, I looked focused, as if something inside had hardened, not into bitterness, but into resolve. I whispered into the still air, "They used the internet to smear me. I'll use it to expose her." At home, I returned to my laptop, backed up the folder, encrypted the files. I created multiple copies, one on a hard drive, one in the cloud, and one hidden. This wasn't just about fighting back, it was about building proof. Hours passed. I didn't speak to anyone. I barely ate. I read through more comments, documenting patterns. Who believed her? Who echoed the lies? Who hesitated? Then I opened a blank post window and began to type, not with rage, but with clarity. "My mother left me a will. The full story is coming. Let truth speak for itself." I scheduled the post for 8 p.m., prime time for attention. The rest of the afternoon passed in an odd silence. My phone buzzed again, a tag in Seraphine's post. A mutual friend commented, "Maris, please share your side too. This doesn't feel right." I didn't reply. Instead, I stood by the window and watched the golden light shift across the harbor. Boats danced on the surface. A pelican drifted low. Everything out there was indifferent to the chaos of humans, but inside me, things were aligning. By dusk, the editor I'd hired to restore the video messaged me, "Final cut ready, looks perfect. Want to preview before release?" I wrote back, "No, schedule it. Midnight, let them wake up to it." As the sky turned navy and the lights blinked across the dock, I backed up everything one last time. The post was ready, the video cued, my documents intact, my truth sharpened. I turned off the lamp. Darkness swept through the cottage, but it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like armor. I stood at the window and whispered, not to the world, but to myself, "Let them keep digging. The deeper they go, the harder they'll fall." A week passed in a strange hush, like the breath held before a storm breaks. The smear campaign had slowed, not stopped, but fizzled into shadows, a murmur on message boards and beneath social media posts. People still whispered, still speculated, but the frenzy had lost its bite. I didn't respond to any of it. Not one post, not one comment. Each night after work, I returned to my small apartment near the marina, changed into my softest sweater, and settled at my desk with the same routine. Headphones on, eyes locked on the screen, replaying the restored video of my mother. The static was gone now, the crackle of age cleaned away by digital hands. Her voice, firm, warm, undiluted, felt like home. She looked into the lens like she could see me, like she'd waited for the right time to be heard. And now it was time. On the evening of Saber's 72nd birthday, I drove across Charleston with the windows cracked slightly, the air thick with salt and Spanish moss. The marshlands glowed gold beneath the dying sun, the water reflecting streaks of fire and rust. In the back seat sat a slim black case, inside it a USB drive, small, silent, but heavy with truth, heavy with justice. When I turned onto the estate's gravel drive, I slowed. The house rose before me in full performance mode, spotless, glowing, dripping with money and intention. Cars blanketed the circular lawn. Valet staff in tailored uniforms directed traffic with polite smiles. Through the wide-open French doors came the sound of clinking glasses, polite laughter, and a soft jazz quartet. It was everything I remembered, elegant, artificial, and built like a mask. I parked in the shadows near the gate, the furthest spot from the entrance. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. My dress was deliberate, smooth gray satin just below the knee, not flashy, not demure. I added a matte red lip, the kind that didn't smudge. I didn't want to look like someone who was trying. I wanted to look inevitable, As I walked up the stone path, the butler, Gregory I remembered, opened the door, surprise flickering across his otherwise professional face. "Ms. Maris?" I smiled politely. "Just here for dinner." There was a pause, a calculation in his eyes, then a subtle nod. "Of course. Welcome." The scent of lemon polish and catered seafood hit me immediately. The chandeliers glittered, and conversations hummed in the air like low music. People in cocktail dresses and tuxedo light mingled around gilded tables. I spotted Leora by the bar. She met my eyes and gave the briefest, approving nod. Seraphine stood near the fireplace, a vision in emerald sequins. She was surrounded by well-wishers, her laugh tinkling just a beat too loud. When she saw me, the laughter stopped. Her eyes narrowed for half a second before she rearranged her face into practiced surprise. "Maris, what a surprise!" I stepped closer. "Isn't it?" I said sweetly, then brushed past her before she could recover the upper hand. I found a chair toward the back of the dining hall. No name card, no fuss. Perfect. I sat, smoothed the napkin over my lap, and placed my clutch on the table. The USB inside felt warm from my palm. The party unfolded in curated elegance. Saber, seated at the head of the long table, was surrounded by flattery and wine. When the final guest arrived and all phones were silenced, Saber stood. He raised a glass, commanding the room. 72 years, he announced, voice booming, and I couldn't have done it without family. Here's to many more memories. Applause, a few camera flashes, smiles. I stood slowly, heart thudding but steady. "Before the cake," I said, voice smooth but carrying across the table, "I'd like to share a message from someone who couldn't be here tonight, but whose presence is deeply felt." Silence stretched like wire. Saber looked puzzled. Seraphine's hand froze on her champagne flute. I walked to the corner table beside the projection screen. "It's short," I added, "but it matters." I connected the USB to the waiting laptop. The quartet stopped. The lights dimmed. For a moment, there was nothing but breath and anticipation. Then, my mother. There she was on the screen, her presence immediate. She sat at our old kitchen table, the afternoon sun spilling behind her. Her gray-streaked hair was tied back, her eyes fierce, honest. Her voice filled the room. "To my youngest, my quiet storm, Maris, I leave what's dearest to me, my house, my accounts, my shares. You have always been my compass, and you will guide our family when I no longer can." Gasps. A fork dropped. Whispers spread like fire through dry grass. She continued, unfazed by the rising discomfort in the room. "To Seraphine and Saber, I leave my love, but I trust Maris to honor what I built." And then, black screen. No music resumed. No one clapped. The silence was a living thing. I stood beside the projector, letting the stillness hold. Seraphine stared straight ahead, jaw locked. Saber's hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly, his knuckles blanched. Behind me, I heard someone murmur, "So that's why she came." Another guest was already texting. Leora looked like she could finally breathe. I unplugged the USB and slipped it back into my clutch. No victory speech, no dramatics. I turned to leave. As I passed Seraphine, she hissed, "You'll regret this." I leaned in just enough for her to feel the full weight of my calm. "No, you will." And then I walked, through the glittering foyer, past Gregory's stunned silence, out into the velvet dark night. The air smelled like magnolia and smoke. I didn't look back until I reached my car. Inside the mansion, through wide windows, I saw stillness. Guests unmoving, Saber slumped, the cake untouched. I started the engine, headlights flaring into the driveway. I didn't need applause. I didn't need them to admit what they knew. Let them eat cake. I had already served the truth. The drive out of the neighborhood didn't feel like escape. It felt like release, like something quietly exhaling after holding its breath for too long. My tires rolled slowly over the gravel, each crunch beneath the wheels sounding like polite applause. A final farewell no one dared to say out loud. The moon hung low, silver and slow, casting its light across the marshland as if to guide me away. I didn't look back. Not once. I didn't need to. By the time the sun had fully risen, I was already at the cottage, the place that had once promised peace, but now felt like a room filled with echoes. It was smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally, like the walls had contracted under the weight of everything I'd lived through. The memories embedded in the floorboards, in the corners of the ceiling, in the worn couch cushion I used to curl into during storms. They felt like ghosts that no longer belonged to me. I opened the suitcase and began to pack. I didn't rush. Every item was folded with care. One by one, I chose only the essentials: clothes for a warmer climate, a worn pen I'd used for journaling as a girl, a single photograph of my mother and me, taken at Folly Beach years ago. Her smile was windswept, her eyes dancing, her arms wrapped around a younger version of myself who didn't yet understand betrayal. The photo went into a side pocket. Next, a small seashell she once handed me after a walk, one I'd nearly forgotten I had kept. I smiled faintly. It was cracked, but still beautiful. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed gently, almost like it knew this was the last time it would serve me. I clicked through accounts, social media, subscriptions, newsletters, old friend circles that had long since grown silent. One by one, I deleted them all. No trace, no digital thread left behind for anyone to pull. Only one message was sent, a forward to my lawyer. The final set of documents, screenshots, recordings, and scanned pages, I attached them all and clicked send. Then I shut the laptop and breathed, the room feeling clearer somehow. I sat with the photograph in my hands for a while, running my thumb over my mother's face. In that moment, I wasn't the woman who had been humiliated or betrayed. I was her daughter again. Dawn stretched across the room in long golden beams. I placed the photo face up on the nightstand beside the bed. In the suitcase went the printed copy of the will. The USB drive containing the full video from the reveal, unedited, raw, was tucked between layers of fabric like a hidden truth. I zipped the case, the sound final and satisfying. I walked out without ceremony, no tears, no lingering, just one last glance at the ocean in the distance, where the sky met the sea like a promise of something cleaner. The air stung a little with cold, but it felt good, bracing, honest. I drove toward Saber's estate in silence. The fog had not yet lifted from the lower hills, and the roads shimmered with dew. I knew the address by heart, not because it mattered anymore, but because certain things, once branded into you, never fully fade. His neighborhood was pristine as always, the kind where people trim their hedges like they're trimming reputations. Too perfect, too quiet. I didn't ring the bell. Instead, I slid a slim envelope under the front door. Inside was a note and a final check, drawn from the last account still bearing my name. On the memo line, I'd written, "This is the last check that will ever carry my name. You lost your daughter a long time ago. I just hadn't told you yet." No rage. No begging, just truth. I stood for a moment, watching the corner of the envelope curl slightly on the welcome mat. A wind stirred, but it didn't lift it. No one opened the door. I didn't wait for someone to. I turned around and walked away, not fast, but with certainty. As I passed through the estate, everything felt suspended, like time was pausing just long enough to let me go without resistance. On impulse, I turned toward Leora's street. Her small garden gate was ajar, just slightly, the same way she always left it when she wanted someone to know they were welcome. I pulled in and parked. She was standing outside, cardigan draped over her shoulders, arms open before I even fully stepped out. I didn't say a word. I dropped the suitcase onto the walkway and ran to her. The hug was fierce, unyielding, like she was holding every piece of me that had tried to fall apart. "She'd be proud, you know," Leora whispered, her voice catching somewhere between strength and sorrow. "I didn't do this for pride," I said, pulling away with a small smile. "I did it so I could breathe again." She nodded, brushing hair from my face. "Then breathe deep, and don't look back." I didn't. I said I got in the car, pulled onto the main road, and let the drive take me somewhere new. The houses turned to trees, and the trees gave way to glimpses of the bay. I rolled down the windows and let the wind rush in, salty, sharp, and clean. It tousled my hair and stole the last scent of that old life from my clothes. My playlist shuffled and landed on one of the songs my mother used to hum when she cooked or gardened, an old folk tune about rivers and leaving things behind. I smiled and let it play. My hand rested on the wheel. For once, it didn't feel like I was steering away from something. It felt like I was steering toward something. Maybe not a new life, not yet, but a new kind of stillness, one that wasn't crowded with apology. The city skyline faded behind me. I whispered, just to the wind, I may carry scars, but not their names, not anymore. And maybe I would never get an apology. But I got something better. Freedom. Sometimes the ones who hurt us the most aren't strangers. They're the ones who sat at our dinner tables, smiled in family photos, and called us by name. But healing begins the moment we stop waiting for apologies that will never come and start reclaiming the truth for ourselves. What would you have done if your own family erased your name? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this one hit home, don't forget to subscribe for more true family stories that reveal the strength behind the silence.